I know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show.
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final on Tuesday. The Oilers have a massive hill to climb. CJ, why are you so confident that the Edmonton Oilers can come back and force a Game 7?
I mean, you look at their history this season and some of the things they managed to do. I think some of the doubts they might have started to plant. I'm not saying at all that they have a mental advantage down 3-1. I'm not, about to play Game 5 on the road in Florida with a chance for the Panthers to win the Cup. I mean, obviously, Florida's in an extremely advantageous position, but I do think that was a potential swing for Edmonton. That, obviously it's a great night for the people that cheer for that team. It's 8-1 win, the kind of win that you don't expect to see at any time of year, let alone in a Stanley Cup final game. But, chasing Sergei Bobrovsky, having Connor McDavid really make his mark on the series. I just think that Edmonton does have a strange little bit of sneaky confidence about them now. I'm certainly not hating on the Panthers in any reason, but I just think it wouldn't surprise me. You look back over the first 3 games of the series, it didn't necessarily feel like a 3-0 Panthers advantage. This series could easily be 2-2 is kind of my view. So it wouldn't surprise me to see Edmonton find a way to come back from the brink, to do what they've sort of done all season long, whether that was being in 30th place in late November and climbing up the standings, being down to Vancouver, down to Dallas. I just don't think they're the kind of team that's going to panic, and I think they're good enough to win a few more games here.
Then again, the Edmonton Oilers did win 16 in a row at one point. It's just, we've only seen 4 teams do this. And 8, they've won a bunch of streaks in a row. They could find a way and do it. It's just, it's so difficult to accomplish that feat in a playoff series, let alone the Stanley Cup Final.
Well, the difference in a playoff series, though, I would say is, yes, I'm not saying it's easy. History tells us this is like,
no,
it was whatever. It was maybe a 5% chance down 3-0. I don't know whether they have to 7 or 8% chance. Like, it's still massively long odds. So I don't want to be seen as, getting too far out of myself. But I would say the difference in a playoff series is the thing about momentum is it really does shift a little bit. And clearly, so let's rewind the tape a bit. I'm trying to remember the days now. That game was on Saturday. So on Saturday morning,
yes,
the Panthers families got on a plane from Fort Lauderdale, flew to Edmonton with the hope of seeing the Cup. Then they didn't, they saw that game instead. They fly all the way back overnight to Florida. I would imagine if I was with those people, they're probably still pretty optimistic, excited about what Tuesday could hold. But imagine they lose Tuesday, then they got to fly all the way back to Edmonton. Like, I just think the pressure does start to shift to the other team if you can get one more win. Really, it's the most obvious thing you could say because the season could end in Game 5. But Game 5 to me is the absolute huge one because I just feel like it's a totally different series at 3-2. As Connor McDavid said, being dragged the Panthers back to Alberta. I think that's what can shift inside a series. Now, that being said, there's a reason why both teams that go down 3-0 lose the series. We've seen it happen, though. It's not, the Kings did it in a first round series. It can be done. So I guess all I would say is this. I'm not tuning out. I'm at the game, so I'm obviously not tuning out. But if I was a hockey fan, I wouldn't be tuning out on this series just yet because I think there's certainly the possibility for it to deliver some more drama. We haven't talked a lot about Matthew Tkachuk in the series because we haven't seen a lot of Matthew Tkachuk. I just think a lot of things are lining up for Edmonton to at least make it difficult, which is the best they could hope for down 3-0 because it did not look good after Game 3 in Edmonton. But I was pretty impressed with the way they came out in Game 4. It's a lot of the depth players in this series have been putting up goals for Edmonton too. If Stuart Skinner can maybe steal them a game in Game 5, Bobrovsky had looked kind of unbeatable in the early stages of the series. Now that notion is gone. They got 3 by him in Game 3 and then 5 before he was pulled in Game 4. So I just think that it's there for Edmonton to make this pretty compelling still.
You probably saw the graphic from Sportsnet after losing 3 straight games under Chris Knobloch as head coach. The Oilers, yes, they did go on an 8-game winning streak. from November to December. Then late December to January, they had that 16-game winning streak, and then a 5-game winning streak from late February to early March. This team has found a way to pull wins together, albeit in the regular season, after losing a significant amount of games. I still think it's too crazy of a hill for them to climb. I think it was good that they were able to get game 4. Hey, big up to the fans who were at the fan plaza. We're enjoying Edmonton, and we're enjoying all the vibes of winning a Stanley Cup final game. And then, of course, Connor McDavid having the game that he had. The fans can at least say they had something. But I don't know. I could still see this ending in 5. But who knows? You could be right. It could. I think
get to 7. When we do Thursday show, I'm going to be recording from Edmonton. That's what I think.
Man, so this am I going to have to make the drive up?
I'm not going to Edmonton for locker clean out. So when I say that I would be in Edmonton, that would be because there's a game on Friday. Just to clear up any potential misconceptions there about what that might mean. But it's funny. I don't know if you saw the story I wrote, Julian, in the Athletic, but. Weirdly, this Oilers season, some of the guys say turned on a speech from Matthias Janmark, of all people, in a game in Carolina that they lost 6-3. I didn't look this up, but Matthias told me when I asked him about it that they were down something like 4-0 at the first intermission. Might not be exact, but he basically said we were out of the game by the first intermission. It was his first game back from a shoulder injury. He'd missed a month, and he said he'd been sort of watching things build from the press box, like watching the frustration kind of go, and he just decided to speak up after the game. And from that moment on, Edmonton won 8 in a row. They lost 3, and then they won 16 in a row. So they won 24 of their next 27 games after this speech. And I just thought it was kind of fitting. I mean, Matthias Janmark is part of what's maybe been the Oilers' most effective, like, overall line. I mean, I'm not denying Connor McDavid isn't their best player. I know he's got 7 points in the final. He's breaking all these records. But, the line with Connor Brown, Janmark, and Henrique actually played the most against Barkov in game 4. That line has not given up a 5-on-5 goal against when they've been on the ice, and they've become kind of a reliable shutdown line. And then obviously Janmark scores a shorthanded goal in that game. He sets up another one to Henrique. And so, I don't know. There's some kind of mojo there with the Oilers. I'll say that. And it's still so hard to imagine winning 3 in a row. Like, they could force game 7 and still lose, obviously. Like, I mean, but I just feel like they're not quite done yet. I think this series is going to be stretched out.
For sure. I'll say this. That Carolina game against Edmonton, if the Oilers find a way to come back and pull this off, we're going to go back to that game a lot. I believe that's the same game, and Oilers fans can tweet at me if I'm wrong. But what Oilers fans did a lot on social media, there's this one shot on the Oilers bench, I believe from that game, the Oilers are down by a lot, and Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl are sitting next to each other, and they kind of just tap each other. And I get it, like, if you see it in isolation, you wouldn't think that much. You're probably thinking, okay, you know what? Things aren't going so great. You just want to make sure your buddy's head is still up and just trying to keep his spirits up. But the fact that the Oilers found a way to turn their season around immediately after that, a lot of Oilers fans go back to that clip and say, like, yeah, like that's a turning point. Like, those two guys realizing that things can still get better. And I know it's just one clip, but hearing that story about Matthias Janmark, it's very clear that that was a turning point for this season.
That was their line in the sand moment where they had to sort of make some decisions. I think, like, they had to decide, are we actually going to do the things we need to do to get out of this, or are we just going to break apart? I'll say this about, because it's kind of an interesting little nugget, right? This didn't come out during the season. One of the players mentioned it to me on media day, and I didn't have a chance to explore it because Edmonton just started losing games, and I was writing other stories about the Panthers and whatnot. But, like, I went up to Zach Hyman in the room after they won that 8-1 game, and I was like, hey, this is like a really random question, but do you remember this speech from Janmark? He's like, oh, yeah. He remembered right away. He's like, we call it playing the janitor way, because that the nickname for Janmark in the dressing room is the janitor. And he gave me sort of the background. Connor Brown bought into it. Then I stopped Janmark. Like, it was definitely a moment. The hard thing is you're reporting so many months later. It's like 6-7 months later. And so I don't know exactly what was said, but Janmark he played on the Dallas team. I know, like, the gist of what he said is when he played for the Dallas Stars in 2019-20, they started 1-7-1. And he said that at that point, they sort of made an internal commitment to playing a different style, to leaning in on their defensive play and letting their offense flow out of that. And that year they went all the way to the Stanley Cup final in the COVID bubble. And, he said that he saw the same things for the Oilers. He told me something like, he said, look, I know everyone here is trying hard. Like, this isn't an issue of care, but we were not going to score our way out of this situation. And we've got to really commit to playing defense. And one thing Connor Brown noted is the next game in Washington, they won 5-0. He said, like, kind of ironically, we sort of focused on defensive play, and all of a sudden we win a game 5-0. I just think that you see a lot of that in the 8-1 win they had in game 4 of this series. And so, look, any team, there's 2 teams left. It's freaking almost July. So any 2 teams that would be playing in any year we're recording the podcast are 2 great teams. Like, we could go in hard on why the Panthers deserve the cup too. I'm not trying to present only Edmonton's side of this. I guess it's just the Edmonton side is more compelling right now because they're struggling to try to keep the season alive against the odds, against Julian's feelings about what's going to happen, against everyone's doubts. Naturally, hey, dude, those are well-earned doubts. It's 3-1. But, I'm just saying I'm mentally strapped in for another 15-hour travel day back to Edmonton for game 6.
That sounds like an amazing way to mentally prepare yourself for that trip.
It was long.
15 hours. That's insane.
You know what, though? Yesterday,
that's long. That's crazy.
I'm worried about saying something on this pod that's going to somehow shut this down, but I found a loophole when traveling on Air Canada.
Whoa. Okay. You need to say that loophole right now.
Well, I don't know. So I have Bell 5 TV at home. So this will only apply to such a small percentage of our listeners because I know you're all over the world.
Okay.
But my Bell service, I have an app where I can watch TV on my phone, from my cable service, but I can only usually do it when I'm in Ontario. But if I log on to the Wi-Fi of a plane right when we take off from Ontario, even when you fly into the US, it just keeps going. So yesterday on my Bell 5, but because I had a connection in Toronto, but I watched the entirety of the US Open final day on the flight down. And literally I landed, clutch. I ran it around 7:15 or 7:20 Eastern time. I literally saw all that unfortunate ending for Rory McIlroy. Where it would have been a problem, actually, if there would have been a playoff, I probably wouldn't. It would have cut off before the playoff, but which would have been its own sort of personal agony for me. But anyway, the travel day wasn't so bad yesterday because I literally my second flight I just watched that golf and that was unreal. It was great drama. I was in Team Rory's camp as I always am, and I felt gutted for him. Anyway, so the travel day wasn't so bad. I'm just saying because I had the golf to watch.
I was gonna bring up Rory and ask CJ because of the reaction he had after losing against Bryson DeChambeau. I was getting sore loser vibes, but we can save that for us, CJ. Or if you have your thought on that, you can go in on that.
It's not a sore loser vibes. I mean, I'll say this: no one gives himself more than Rory publicly. He has taken so much crap through all this live stuff from the PGA Tour bosses and everyone. The man went through the starting point of a divorce publicly, and then
he did.
And then that stopped in the last week. He's played every week. He's in contention every week. He does tons of everything. I'm not sure that the interview. I mean, look, as a journalist, of course, you want athletes to speak in all situations, in glory and agony and everything. But I think anyone with a heart or a brain can understand why he declined to do that yesterday and left. I don't think that wasn't about Bryson. You know the struggle this guy has been through. He is a all-time. This would be if Connor McDavid doesn't get the cup this year, and then he goes through 5 or 6 more seasons, and then gets to the cup in his 17th year, and they lose. My point is, this guy has been a generational golfer who's gone 10 years without winning a major. It's almost statistically impossible given how great he is. And he lost last year's US Open by 1 shot. He had a chance to win the British Open a couple years ago at St. Andrews. This is his own personal hell, and he completely choked on it in that there's just no other way around it. He'd been 396 for 396 of putts of 3 feet in this year, and then he missed a 3-footer and a 4-footer in 2 of his last 3 holes. So yeah, I'm just saying I can give him some grace because he has very publicly been through some shit. And, in an age where I'd like to think we're a little more aware of everyone's mental health and everything, I'm not saying, call it a choke. That's fine with me. Objectively, he lost himself the tournament. This wasn't a case where someone played a little bit better and beat him at the end. Bryson made a ridiculous up and down on the 18th, but it was still there. Even with that up and down, though, if Rory makes a 3-foot and a 4-foot putt, he wins by 1. So, anyway, I give him some grace is all I'm going to say. And again, criticize him for or discuss quite openly what went wrong in his round. I'm not defending the play, but I'm just saying let's also remember there's a human being there, and we often it's what we don't know about someone that you can miss it. What we know about Rory's life right now. I don't even know how he managed to contend in that tournament, and so I'm okay with him speeding out of the parking lot. And do you know what? Knowing him, he's going to own it. There's a tournament this week. I don't know if he's going to pull out or not, the Travelers, but I bet the next time he sits in front of a microphone, you'll be impressed with what he says.
You've completely convinced me on switching my opinion on this, because at first I thought, okay, maybe he could have stayed a little bit longer. Maybe he could have not sped out of the parking lot and spun his wheels 6 minutes after it was over. But I appreciate your perspective, and you're right. We really do need to be, especially us as journalists, just considering the human being more and what they're going through. And I think you explained that really well. So I appreciate that perspective.
Right. And look,
anyway,
I'm gonna cover a Stanley Cup game in a couple days, one way or another, where a team loses, and I'll have to keep that in mind. If maybe someone who doesn't talk who I'd want to talk or whatever. I mean, I don't expect that to happen, but you never know. But let's
Connor
say
McDavid.
Someone puts it in their own net in overtime of Game 7 to lose. That's the equivalent. That is the equivalent of the way Rory lost that tournament. He had one hand on a trophy.
He choked it.
He really did. If he didn't have one hand on the trophy, he at least had one hand on the playoff. And playoff, it's just down to 2 guys and it's 2 holes in the case the way it works in the U.S. Open. He to lose it in regulation is, I don't know. I'll tell you this much. I will be watching the heck out of the British Open, though, now. Because, how does he bounce back becomes immediately part of the storyline.
We need a sponsored golf break on this show, because every time we've discussed, and I know you love the sport, you've covered the sport too. Every time we've discussed golf on this show, it's after some major thing happens at a tournament, and it ends up being riveting discussion either way.
Yeah, although I'm worried that we've lost half of our listeners. They're like, wait a minute, this is supposed to be a hockey podcast.
No chance. They'll once we start getting into
I blame the NHL for this though, in a roundabout way, because what is
you
today?
blame the NHL for this? It's
June 17th.
It is,
and there's still hockey games to be played. This schedule is starting to get nuts. An underrated part of this season though is if it goes to Game 6, that game is on June 21st. So that would mean between June 21st, and I'm not even saying it ends in Game 6, but just for argument's sake, between June 21st and July 1st, you have the awarding of the Stanley Cup, you have the draft, you have the opening of the buyout window for players, you have qualifying offers, and you have the start of free agency and awards.
Oh my! That's just
here's the thing.
Oh, you go ahead.
In COVID times, we had weird stuff like this happen. And I think everyone understood, because it's all right, the world's all over the place. This shouldn't be the normal though. This shouldn't be how it's scheduled in a year where there's nothing that got in the way. There wasn't even an Olympic break or something where you're okay, it had to push the season back because everyone had to take 2 weeks off to go to Milan or whatever. This was just the schedule. It's insane.
Are we going to have a massive content meeting in advance of, if it gets to that point where we're going to have to find a way to handle all of the flow of incoming activity leading up to free agency? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, basically, if the series doesn't end. Now, if the series ends in Game 5, it's not so bad. I mean, then everything I just said gets stretched over 2 weeks instead of 10 days. But if it goes 7, everything I just said gets stretched over 6 days. Anyway. I just started to have this realization because, I'm not going to do this, but if I turn my camera around right now, my bag just looks like it exploded in this room, right? Because I've been on the road for a little while, but I'm but if this series goes 7, I'm not even going to go home. I'm just going right to Vegas and then flying home June 30th and straight into free agency day. This isn't about me, but I'm just it started to hit me this morning. this could be really crazy. This could be like almost once in a lifetime.
Like, you might not see your own bed until like mid-July, or you might even go straight to a cottage when you get back.
No, I don't have any cottage plans this year.
Oh,
Well, I don't own a
Pierre
cottage, to
LeBrun
be
surely
blunt.
has the invite. Well, I figured Pierre LeBrun got you the invite.
Yeah, Pierre's life's getting busier. He's got like 3 kids that are grown, and doesn't mean that there's no invite. It's
Okay,
just like
all right.
it was a little easier when we were all younger. There's like less things to schedule around.
Okay. All right. Anyway, I realize we went on a bit of a tangent and it went in
That was all
300
my
different
fault.
directions. That's okay. That
And
is
the
fine.
NHL's
It was
fault,
still
the
fun
schedulers.
regardless. We should blame Gary. No, we don't have to blame Gary. I'm kidding. Connor McDavid breaks the record for most playoff assists in one playoff campaign. 6 most points that's ever been scored in a postseason by one player. Your thoughts on his performance in Game 4 specifically?
Well, it's getting kind of crazy. Like when you start to look at the record book, like it's so funny. You get to this stage in the season, and like my brain can start to flip just with one game because like it's stacking on top of each other. But is it the 4th most playoff points I think ever in any playoffs? Like that's
I had it at 6, or maybe I looked at the stat wrong, but I can double check.
I might have too. The point is I know only Lemieux or Gretzky have ever had better individual seasons in the playoffs. Like this is he's only the 3rd player ever to reach this many points in one playoffs. I mean, I guess we already kind of knew this guy was going to have his bust, put on hockey's Mount Rushmore. But things like this just reinforce it. Like it starts to feel more real. And I mean, we don't need to go into Conn Smythe talk. I know it's too soon, but it's just like all of a sudden the conditions are there where even as a losing player somewhere in the series, maybe Connor McDavid has. I shouldn't even say maybe. He's definitely got an argument, but he might end up having a compelling enough argument to sway some people. So I'll tell you, going into Game 4, we went in on the Conn Smythe talk. We won't do that again. But we didn't even mention him. I don't think like that. My point is, even entering that game, that was not a part of a conversation when we were having that topic. Now all of a sudden it's like, wow, 4-point game. Does he have another one? Does Edmonton rally back here? I mean, this is historical, special stuff. And that's the other part, I guess, when we were talking about the series. How could Edmonton do this? Well, with due respect to all the Panthers, only one team has that guy. And, I don't know what Draisaitl's dealing with. He certainly hasn't looked his best. And he's also been such a clutch playoff performer over like many seasons now. But if he can somehow squeeze a little bit more out of whatever energy, whatever he might be dealing with health-wise, I mean, that gives them a puncher's chance. So you're watching history here with Connor McDavid one way or another. The fact is whenever you're breaking a Wayne Gretzky record, I mean, it almost speaks for itself. I mean, the man, I think he retired with 61 individual records. I know a few others have fallen. Obviously, his all-time goals mark is in danger. Crosby matched him for most point per game seasons consecutively and total in 19. So Crosby could pass 2 Gretzky records next year. But I mean, you're getting down. You've done something right. It's sort of like in golf. If you're like passing a Tiger Woods record, if you're passing any Wayne Gretzky record, even if it seems like a little obscure, most playoff assists in one playoff campaign is that, there's no posters being made for that. But I think it tells a story about, Connor McDavid, A, is no longer a young player in the league, and B, he's already an all-time great, in my opinion. I mean, he's going to hit 1,000 points, 3rd or fastest, 4th fastest all-time next season. Still got a chance to win a Conn Smythe Trophy, the Stanley Cup this year, and he could add to that point total. He could get into the 40s, which is pretty nuts when you actually start wrapping your mind around it. 40 playoff points is bonkers.
Tied for 5th most points were ever recorded in a postseason. I, for whatever reason, had read 6th, and then I think you guessed 4th. It was actually in between of both of that. But yes, tied at 38 points with Wayne Gretzky's 5th, the highest total there. You're right. Wayne and Mario, the only other ones who have recorded more points in one single Stanley Cup playoffs. Just insane record.
And do you have? I'm sorry to do this because I don't have my laptop in front of me, but
who's
I think is Barkov the top Panthers scorer this playoffs? Is he at 20 points? 21?
I I don't have to assume. We have computers. We can. It should be.
That's why
him.
I'm asking. But
yes, he should be.
I would look it up, but I don't have it.
Yeah,
I don't have the ability.
I would
to.
believe it is him. That's fine. We do this stuff. We're allowed to do this stuff on the fly here. It's totally fine. Like anyway, I just want to make sure people are like, oh no, they don't know this stuff. It happens, people. Anyway, it should be him. I don't know why I'm not getting it right away, but anyway, Alexander Barkov has been that guy throughout this postseason.
My
and
point, though,
producer
was going
Drew
to
was
be
somewhere
that
in the back, being like, "Yeah, go ahead."
my point was going to be that basically McDavid has almost twice as many individual points as any Panther. Which is just like I'm putting it in context. Like it's nuts.
It is crazy. Like, but I mean, him and I mean, you look at the rest of the Oilers on that team too. They've been leading the top of that leaderboard for points in playoffs. Like they've been great all postseason long. And I'll say the idea of at least if they get it to 6 games, you think about the idea of even if he does lose, Connor McDavid be considered for that. Maybe I don't know.
He's definitely going to be considered. He's definitely going to get votes. The question is, can he get enough of the votes? And that, I don't have the answer. And as one of the voters, I kind of feel compelled not to go too deep into my thoughts because,
very fair.
Not trying to influence or sway anyone.
Yeah, Barkov 21 points. Carter Verhaeghe leading the team in goals with 10. By the way, going to add that as well. But yes, Alexander Barkov 21 points, leading everyone on the Florida Panthers in points.
Right,
to this
so
point
17 behind McDavid. Is all I'm saying.
That's just hilarious.
And again, I'm not trying to spray Barkov. I'm trying to use it as more of a way to put into perspective the season the playoff season McDavid's had, and the season, frankly, too. But
for sure. Any other Stanley Cup final thoughts before we get to Leafs Corner?
No, I think that's good. I made it down here. Welcome to the Sheridan Suites Plantation.
Sheridan Suites Plantation. All right.
Yeah, I'm not staying at the beach. I'm kind of in the no man's land here between the rink and the beach.
Must be nice.
I'm staying 2 doors down from where I was for games 1 and 2. So it's like same hotel. Like I have to make sure not to go to the other door by accident. Creep somebody out.
At least I'm glad you've at least mapped out and anticipated everything. I can't imagine being like someone completely inexperienced in this situation, traveling in this type of series, and then trying to plot their travel plans on the fly. I forgot who tweeted that there were a handful of media members during Game 4 who were looking up flights for Fort Lauderdale. Oh yeah, I don't know how that would go.
I canceled my flight to Toronto, like I was going to go home if it ended at the second intermission, which is a little risky because you might just witness the craziest comeback ever, and then you're doubly screwed because then you got to write about it and you weren't mentally ready to write about it, and you also have to do your travel. But I'll tell you, I'll give it a pro tip to like journalism schools. They should have I don't have to be a whole course, but there should almost be like a travel agent section, because you really are part. At least in sports media, I don't know if it works the same for our colleagues who do news and everything, but you end up being half like literally travel agent.
That's true.
I like it, as I've said, but like some guys or some of our colleagues hate it, and it adds like stress that they don't want or need.
We'll add that to the list of things journalism schools should be doing. We'll make sure we'll go through all the schools and provide your list. This episode of the Chris Johnston Show is brought to you by Shady Rays. Get ready for the season ahead with quality shades built to last. Our friends at Shady Rays have you covered with premium polarized shades that won't break the bank. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company offering a world-class product rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. Their shades have durable frames and crystal clear optics, making them the perfect choice for all outdoor adventures. They have hundreds of options to choose from, so you're bound to find the perfect pair to match your style, like these beautiful bad boys over here. I've been kind of in and out, dealing with some family stuff, and I've had the opportunity to wear these out in the Caribbean while being with the fam. Love the black and the gold on my Shady Rays frames here. Big up to you guys. Love wearing them. Plus, if your shades ever go missing or take an unexpected hit, do not sweat it. They have the most insane protection in all of eyewear. Every pair is backed by lost or broken replacements. And if you don't love your shades, exchange them for a new pair or return worry-free within 30 days. There's no risk when you shop. Their team always has your back with personal and fast support. Go to shadyrays.com and use code Johnston for 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. That's shadyrays.com and use the code Johnston for 50% off 2 or more pairs of polarized sunglasses. This episode of the Chris Johnston Show is brought to you by Shopify. Name some dynamic teammates who got it done, like Gronk and Brady, Pippen and Jordan, Venus and Serena come to mind. But what about the perfect teammates when it comes to growing your business? That's you and Shopify. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage? Shopify is there to help you grow. Whether you're auctioning off autographed apparel or selling sleek skis, Shopify helps you sell everywhere. From their all-in-one commerce platform to their in-person POS system, wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify has you covered. They also help you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, up to 36% better compared to other leading commerce platforms. And you could sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Johnston. Okay, let's get to Leafs Corner. Let's talk about Guy Boucher, no longer behind the bench for the Toronto Maple Leafs, who's running their power play. He will not be back with the team. Marc Savard is right there. He coached the Flames power play this past year. A lot of people have made that connection that he would probably succeed Guy Boucher anyway. What's the latest on that story?
Well, it's not just about the power play. Look, Guy Boucher was hired last summer by the Leafs to work under Sheldon Keefe. At that point, they wanted a sort of assistant that had head coaching experience in the NHL. I know they considered John Hines at the time, who was out of work, but he wasn't ready to necessarily leap at being an assistant, and that probably paid off because he was hired by Minnesota in November and is now their head coach. There's a few other people in the mix for that. People always thought it was a weird decision to hire Boucher because his teams as a head coach when he was in Ottawa and Tampa were sort of known for a suffocating defensive style. But one of the things I know that the Leafs were aware of is that he had run the power play for the Canadian World Junior team years ago under Pat Quinn when that team had it, and then Pat Quinn had spoken very highly about him as a power play mind, offensive mind. The Leafs power play this season it took a step back. It wasn't as bad as probably people are going to say it was because everyone remembers the Bruins series where they scored one power play goal in 22 chances. They felt they were seventh best in the league. With the 24% efficiency in the regular season, which, seventh best is not like it's not awful. But I guess, it's hard to look at that and say that either Guy Boucher was able to find the right ways to make the most of everyone's talents or that the players executed enough, whatever. I mean, some combination of the two is obviously probably where the truth lies. But, you go through that year, the power play ends the way it does. You hire a new head coach. I know Berube and Boucher had a lot of discussions and then ultimately Berube made the decision to move on from Boucher. And I don't think it's the worst thing for Guy Boucher. He's still under contract, so he'll still be paid until he gets another job. And, he was about to work for someone who didn't hire him. So, the Leafs, my understanding is, have one opening now for assistant coaches. I think last year they had 4, if you count Manny Malhotra, Boucher, Mike Van Ryn, who's staying on, and then Dean Chenoweth. Chenoweth and Malhotra moved on to other opportunities. Obviously, they hired Lane Lambert to come in, and it sounds like they're still reviewing things, but they're going to hire one other assistant coach, and we'll see if it ends up being Marc Savard, who did work with Craig Berube for a season in St. Louis. I don't think that's a fait accompli, though, which isn't to say it's not going to happen, but I think a lot of people have sort of talked about it as a certainty. I've got sort of mixed messages on that, so I'm not sure what's going to go on. But look, there's been crazy. It's like a merry-go-round right now with assistant coaches. I mean, there's so many people available, and so. I think that there's a lot of different directions the Leafs could go, and we'll see what Berube ends up deciding for his staff.
For just one thing on Guy Boucher here, when Sheldon Keefe was let go from his position, how much did Guy Boucher put himself up for the Leafs job?
Well, naturally, he would want it, right? I mean, he was in that position in part because he had head coaching experience. I'm sure management wanted to make sure they were protected in case they had to make an in-season change or just to even have that degree of experience. I mean, it's no mystery. Guy Boucher had been out of the league for a couple of years since he had last coached, did some TV work in Quebec, but he's probably gonna have to work his way back up to being a head coach. But of course, he's been a head coach in two teams to Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Final, the 2011 Lightning and the 2017 Senators. And so, I don't think he was received a tremendous amount of consideration for the position, given that the Leafs wanted certain things. But I mean, it's only natural that he would be wanting that. But I don't think that that's the main reason he's out today, quite honestly. I think it's more, in meeting with Berube, I think just both sides, it probably worked out best for both. Like, I don't think there's any sort of acrimony or anything here. It's not like he quit in frustration after not getting the head coaching job or anything like that. I think it's just more, Berube is an experienced coach. It's understandable that he's going to want his own staff or most of his own staff. And so it looks, the only of the top line assistants that are staying on is Mike Van Ryn, who he worked with in St. Louis as well. So it's not as though it's a new element for him there. But essentially Guy Boucher is molding his own staff. I mean, the video coaches are staying on, and the goalie coach and things like that. But in terms of like the people directly working with Craig Berube, I mean, I think it's only natural that you'd want him to have a choice at who that is. And as I said, I think this one, it sounds like everyone's fine with kind of the way it all played out. And, the Leafs will make that last hire, I would expect, here pretty soon.
Yeah, that was actually my next question. Like, how long until we could expect any announcement on whoever Guy Boucher's replacement would be?
Well, I think most teams look to have it done by the draft. It doesn't mean you can't hire an assistant. I mean, last year, actually, in fact, Guy Boucher was hired in July by the Leafs last year, as was Mike Van Ryn. So, I mean, I don't think there's a time pressure as much as it's just making sure you find the right person and get it done. There's other teams, Winnipeg out there, still filling out their coaching staff. I think Seattle's still in that position. Nashville too. I mean, I think a lot of teams are still, finalizing their coaching staffs. And so, the Leafs, there's a pretty big pool, I think, of candidates too, bigger than just one name. It's not to say that one name won't get it, but I don't think it's a slam dunk.
Okay. We go from Leafs corner to a very quick Ottawa Senators corner, Sens corner, if that name flies off the tongue. Bruce Garriock for Post Media wrote a quick story about how the Sens have been taking phone calls on their draft picks for the upcoming draft in Vegas. It doesn't seem as if they're in a rush in particular to move on from their top 10 pick, but are you hearing anything about Ottawa? Are you hearing anything about any other team possibly in the top 10 looking to move around their picks?
Well, Jersey at 10, is one as well. I think, we're at the stage where teams especially the teams that are trying to win next season, they have to consider everything. And Ottawa clearly this year, this past season was just not what they were looking for. They were hoping to take a big step towards the playoffs. Didn't happen. And so I think that there's a real pressure there. I mean, coming up on a year under the ownership of Michael Andlauer, obviously Steve Staios running the show now. He's still relatively new in the seat, but he's going to put a stamp on the team. And so, I don't know that none of those teams are committed 100% to selling them, but I think you have to dangle it out there to see what might come your way, to see what other teams, how much they value it, what, maybe players that could help the lineup immediately could be available for it. Actually under Pierre Dorian, the Sens did make some picks, some trades rather, where they gave up high picks, right? They got Alex DeBrincat, for, I don't know what the number pick was, but it was a pretty high draft pick at that time. I think they gave up, some picks to get Jacob Chikrin. And so I think, this is a massive offseason in Ottawa. I mean, we could say that about most teams, but when you've been out of the playoffs as long as they have, when you are trying to rebuild your fan base or rebuild trust with your fan base, frankly, they've had a number of players that everyone likes, the Stutzlas, the Kachucks, Norris. I mean, they've got a core of players most people like, and they've signed them to some pretty smart looking contracts, but they want to see those players progress. They're not young anymore. Brady Tkachuk is in Edmonton with you in the Moss Pit there, hoping to watch his brother Matthew win the cup the other night. But eventually, of course, if you're Brady, I mean, I know the Tkachuk family is very close. Of course, he's here to support Matthew. But I'm just saying, he wants to be playing in these games, right? He doesn't want the story always to be that he's in the stands, having a beer, enjoying the game. So, I think that there's a tremendous amount of pressure in Ottawa to take that step, and so. It doesn't surprise me that they would be listening on the pick and seeing if they can find something that makes sense.
By the way, it was just because it was casually mentioned in that last answer. I was in the Moss Pit, but as an observer, not no fandom, no funny business. I just want that cleared up.
Oh, I don't know. I'm sorry, I didn't know. I don't really know what it is. Like, I guess isn't it just the outdoor viewing area?
Yeah, but they call it the Moss Pit. And it was actually cool to see fans in there enjoying themselves. Ran into a couple different media people there too, who were walking through to get inside the arena. Like it was cool. It was fun. I had a friend visit me for the weekend, and we just decided on a whim to travel up to Edmonton just to see what the vibes were like. And Shania Twain had her free show as well. Yeah, it was an interesting experience.
Are you a Shania guy? Like, did you enjoy the show or?
You know what? I like the show. Maybe there's a story with that could be saved for a future episode near the end of the season.
Okay.
But I will just say that I liked the show. The show with Shania was really fun. It was cool.
I know it was the most attended. Like, the NHL often does these live concerts before playoff games. It was the most attended one they've ever had. So.
It makes a lot of sense. I was about to ask you if you were a Shania guy.
I was in my suit. I wasn't going to go out there into the chaos, but I would absolutely, in an alternate universe, if I was just in Edmonton I would have went and watched that.
I saw at least one media member. I saw at least one media member walk in to the area where the concert was happening. I don't know if they were going in there to partake and celebrate or whatever.
I'm sure they're there to watch. Steve Wino,
but like they were in their suit. They were hanging out. They were hanging out for a little bit.
Yeah, I don't want to be around a bunch of people in the heat at a concert like an hour before I'm due to work a Stanley Cup final game while I'm in a suit.
You don't want to have that don't impress me much in your head before you start writing, CJ. Like,
I loved it though. They played it in the stadium and the fans kept singing it. It was great. No, I'm all for Shania.
That's fine.
Sorry. This is none of this. Everything I'm saying has nothing to do with Shania. I wouldn't go out there for a Taylor Swift concert.
Whoa, that's a lie. That's a lie.
I would not.
You're a Swiftie. You're a Swiftie. But
I'm telling you, an hour before covering a cup final game, I don't want to go to a concert. It sounds weird, but like you have to be ready to work. Like I'm not there to. I don't want to be like stuck in a big crowd and sweaty and
like hover around at the back at least, so there's an easy exit for you to leave.
No, I wouldn't do it. It's why I hate going to Vegas for work trips too. Like I hate being somewhere like when you're not. I'm not there to have fun. I'm there to work. So like I don't know. I have like there's not a lot of gray in there for me, if you know what I'm saying. Like,
I get you. Okay, all right. Very quickly before we get to ask CJ. Just quickly, your thoughts on the Jalen Chatfield extension in Carolina, 3 years at an AAV of $3 million. What does that mean for the Hurricanes and the rest of their defensive situation?
Well, I think it's a good value contract for them to be able to keep him. Basically the way that Carolina does business is this, and it may sound simple, but a lot of teams aren't like this. They set a value and what they think their players are worth, and if those players don't want to sign contracts in line with that, they let them walk away. I mean, I think that essentially explains where we are with Brett Pesce in particular. They tried to extend him last summer. They didn't see the world the same way. He wanted more term and more money than they were willing to offer, which is his right. And he played out a season, and he's now 2 weeks away from testing unrestricted free agency. Same as can be said for Brady Shea. Jacob Slavin sounds like who's got one more year on his deal. You could see an extension for him coming, but Carolina is very comfortable. I would say more than most teams, like letting players walk away. They just are conscious of not committing what signing, overpaying for someone, even if they like the player, they like the person. They are committed to not overpaying for those people. And so Chatfield, they got a deal that they can live with, and certainly that he could deal with. And but I think what it tells us is, okay, that's one more player we know that's signed for the team, but go to your favorite cap site. They still need some defensemen, but they're defensemen also in this marketplace. And I just think that they're willing to let potentially two really good players from their blue line walk out the door on July 1st rather than sign them to a contract that they feel they could come to regret.
Yeah. Also, favorite cap site. Yeah. Puckpedia definitely getting a lot more traffic these days, but we are in the final few weeks of cap friendly being a thing. I wasn't here when the news was going on. That's I gotta say, cap friendly. Look, Puckpedia, we're big fans of that site, and we've thrown flowers at them. But cap friendly, those guys, I'm gonna miss that site. That was an incredible resource for everyone in the hockey world to use. I'm gonna miss being able to use that publicly.
Right, and I'm old enough to remember using General Fanager for my work.
Yep.
Even Cap Geek back in the day. Yeah. Yep. I met Matthew West, the founder of that site, in 2008 in Halifax at the World Hockey Championships. So,
oh man,
unfortunately Matt died far too soon of colon cancer. But if there's a lesson from that I've said is that there will be future sites that everyone feels as beloved about. It fulfills such an absolute need for anyone who covers the league, who follows the league closely. I think even people follow the league a little bit casually can benefit from the tools that those sites make so readily available for everyone. So, Puckpedia, I think, is already doing a great job, but I bet it's going to get even better because it's going to have to. And there's probably opportunities that are now going to come about to monetize, that site, which maybe incentivizes improving it because, I don't know the exact circumstances of everyone who started those sites, but often it's done as kind of a side project for someone who has a day job. And so, look at like how vast the resources are there. Like I can only imagine the time that goes in. And so if those people or people that run the sites aren't making any money, it's hard to put more time into it to make it better. But if more money's coming in, maybe there's more incentive there to improve things. Anyway, it's a long way of saying the market will always, I think it's so important and essential. I think there's always going to be a market there. And I think that we're going to have great sites beyond Cap Friendly and Puckpedia and others in the future. There's room for more than one, I guess is my point.
That is true. Well said.
Imagine there's only one and then Puckpedia gets bought.
Oh, man.
I'm just saying, like, imagine we got to where it was a true monopoly and then that site gets bought. That's I would say at least in this scenario, we have a great site that fills a void. But imagine imagine it went to zero on like July 5th. Like I think that's the date in and around when Cap Friendly gets shuttered. Like
we'd riot.
Seriously, like what would we do? It's like going back to 1995 again or something. Like it would be so strange. Because we're used to having all this info at our fingertips.
Again, I have no interest in going back to the year of our Lord 1995. I am interested, though, in Ask CJ and all the questions we got on Discord and on Twitter that we normally do every Monday, where people can ask CJ literally anything they want. Let's start with Mark Allred. Thoughts on what the Boston Bruins are going to do this offseason after they lock up RFA goaltender Jeremy Swayman?
Too soon to say like exactly what they're going to do. I think that I would see them in the market for a center. Probably the biggest decision right in front of them is what to do with Linus Ullmark. Do they move him? Is that the best way to shift around their cap allocation? What does that do to Swayman? Obviously, Ullmark and Swayman are truly two of the closest goaltending true partnership we have in the league in terms of the way they support each other and lift each other up. So, I think that the Bruins aren't going to be, I don't see them as like massive players in the market, but, I think you're going to see them add some more depth at their forward position. And then, that Ullmark decision, that could go either way. I think that's really about what you're getting back in return. And do you value the cap space? Because obviously you'd have to be then finding another goaltender and all that. But, the Bruins are pretty locked in from a cap perspective. So, I don't see them reshaping everything from top to bottom. It's more about trying to tweak what they already have.
Okay. From Doug McLaughlin. Sorry you have to travel back to Florida for Game 5. I'm an Oiler fan, so not really. My question is about the draft. The draft in Vegas is the last year where all the teams and their entourages will attend. Do we know if next year there will be a central location for draftees and fans?
So I would just say that's not 100% the case. I mean, obviously, this is something that some team owners and front offices have wanted, but I've heard more and more whispers that there is a world where maybe this isn't the last decentralized draft. So I think the best I could say right now is it's unclear still the future of the draft. Um, Typically the league has locked in the location and sort of dates for the next year's draft around the draft itself, like basically 1 year out. This was an exception to the rule. If you remember, we got into October, November, even December, really before it was 100% official that the draft was going to the Sphere. And I know the league did consider some other options around Vegas and things. Had some backup cities locked in. I think Montreal was a backup option again if the whole Vegas thing didn't come together. And so the best I can give you right now, and I don't mind the travel back. I had a good day, as I said, watching the golf, is that we still don't know what's going to happen. And that'll be I'm sure that'll be a question being asked a little bit more emphatically in the next couple of weeks as we get to the draft itself. But I think it's all a big giant TBD. And who knows, maybe the Sphere is such a home run. It's just back at the Sphere again next year. Like, I don't think that's impossible either.
Okay. From Congo Red on Discord, is CJ getting in trouble for revealing the Oilers were scripted to get 8 goals last episode? Apparently you were so high on the Oilers, you very nearly predicted the score for Game 4. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember that. No, I'm not getting in trouble. I don't have the script for Game 5, so I can't spoil anything. The only part of the script that I've revealed is that I expect to be back in Edmonton for a Game 6. So, but I don't have the script for how it's going to go out. I would expect a much closer game. I don't just like. I see it as a game in the third period. It could go either way still. Like, I think it's going to be, it's not bold to say it's not going to be 8-1 again, but I think it's going to be a very tight game. And obviously the circumstances will almost demand that. I think, that Florida really didn't make much of account of itself in that game. But they'd earned the right to kind of punt one away because they built that 3-0 lead.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Anyway, from Rinketic on back to Twitter. Could Patrick Laine be traded for UC Saros or Marty Necas? Could a trade like that happen? P.S. That is also if Columbus gives away a prospect or something.
I don't see that as being so much the fit for Laine because, never say never, but there's just so much uncertainty around his situation. I think, maybe obviously the team knows more than I do. Although I don't know what the team knows. I mean, he's in the player assistance program as Patrick Laine, and there's a high degree of, a lot of that isn't like the GMs don't find out. Even people that work for the HLPA don't find out. Like there's a lot of privacy around what happens when a player's in the care of that program. So the players you're talking about, like Necas, as we've talked about, he's someone that's going to be traded for someone Carolina it can be sure to help them next year. I'm not making any predictions or even trying to hint at anything with Laine. I just don't know when he'll be ready to play again. He had, what they call sort of a cleanup shoulder surgery. He's still under the care of the program. So I think I see his return being more something like when you're trading an unknown, it's like it will be a risk for whoever acquires him is the best way to say it. And so I don't see him being sent straight up for a proven player, and Saros and Necas are both fairly proven players. I mean, I think there's an argument. What is Necas? Is he 60-point guy, 80-point guy? Like what does he become? But he's still definitely a proven NHLer who just had a pretty good rip through the World Championship. So I think it's more of like a futures kind of package for Laine or maybe another question mark player coming back, something like that. But less of, I don't see him being traded for established stars.
Okay. Last one for you from Andrew Hopcraft. I know one of the criteria to get your name on the cup is to play a game in the Stanley Cup final. Could an e-bug get their name on it if the stars aligned?
Yes. I mean, if you play in the Stanley Cup final, you you get it on there. Now, the odds of an e-bug getting into the games is pretty long because the e-bug is really the e-bug to the e-bug right now. Because, for example, the Oilers have had Jack Campbell with them, for the games in Florida. He's been here skating. So if they ever needed to go to a third goalie, they already have Jack Campbell. You would need somehow 3 goalies not eligible to play. You would need Skinner, Campbell, and Pickard not able to be eligible in the game, and the e-bug would get in. But that's long odds. That's even longer odds at Edmonton coming back from 3-0. But you can't say it's impossible. So yes, it's so the criteria is if you play half the regular season games or a game in the Cup final, it's automatic. Your name goes on. Like you could, Edmonton's got some players here that played very little during the regular season, but if you play one game in the final, it's automatic. And then the team can, the team only has so much, you only get so much space there, but they can lobby to add an extra name or two for players that don't meet that criteria. Like I'm thinking like if Edmonton won, maybe they try to find a way to get Sam Gagner's name on the cup or something, because he's been such an important part of the organization and did play for them this season, still is with them. But I'll put it this way. You don't want to be, that would be hard. That's a hard list to make. Because there's only so much room and, every front office and every coaching staff is getting bigger. Like, unfortunately, some names get left off and there's no way around it.
Like you maybe think of Anthony Stolarz, who ended up replacing Sergei Bobrovsky in Game 4. If the Panthers hold on and win, Anthony Stolarz should at least be able to say his name is on the cup. Technically, that works, right? Even if he didn't fully start the entire 60 minutes of that game. Yeah,
100%. But I think he would have been in. Like, actually, I don't know how they treat backup goalies, like because he's been listed as the backup in the games prior to that. I think that sort of counts as appearing in the Cup final. Like he was on the roster for a game, right? Or he was in the lineup for a game. So I think that he would have been automatic anyway. But there's been some guys over the years, like I want to say Ben Smith might have got into one of the Cup finals with Chicago and had barely played during the season, if at all, but they just needed someone kind of in a pinch. Was it Frederick Goudreau for Nashville? Players now for the Wild, but at that point he was like barely an established player, but Nashville needed to use him in the final. I mean, it's happened where some players who probably for certain weren't going to get their name on the cup, but got a chance to just by playing one game. So, I mean, it can be a crazy time of year with injuries and the like.
Okay. We'll be back on Thursday. CJ, go enjoy the Florida Sun and Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final. We'll be back on Thursday with a brand new episode, whether it's for Game 6 or we're talking about the end of the Stanley Cup Final and the road ahead to the draft and the rest of the NHL offseason. Good work as always, Siege.
Thanks, bud.
Peace.
The Chris Johnston Show. Inside the Game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JK McKenzie.